It all started on a cold November morning when I realized something was wrong with Clara. She was my wife, and we lived in a small town where everyone knew each other. My routine was peaceful. I worked hard to ensure nothing was lacking in our home, and Clara had always been the center of my world. She was beautiful, with a presence that lit up any room. Our love was the foundation of my existence, and I did everything to see her happy. However, in the past few months, something had changed. Clara had become more distant, her eyes avoiding mine, and that smile, which once was my beacon, now seemed like a riddle I couldn't solve. I refused to believe anything was wrong, trying to justify her coldness with the stress of daily life. However, the pain of her indifference was like a weight I carried silently. More and more, the small changes accumulated, and I could no longer ignore the reality before me. At that moment, I couldn't imagine that Clara's distance was the prelude to a series of events that would turn my life into a true nightmare. It was a rainy night, and Clara had gone out to meet some friends. I took advantage of the free time to organize our office, not imagining I was about to discover something that would change my life. The rain beat against the window, creating a constant melody as I rummaged through drawers in search of an old document. That was when I found a wooden box locked with a small padlock. After a few minutes of searching, I found a key hidden under a false bottom in Clara's drawer. My curiosity grew with each second. With trembling hands, I opened the padlock, and as I lifted the lid of the box, my heart stopped for a moment. Inside, it was a collection of love letters exchanged between Clara and several men in town. Each envelope had a different name written on the front, and I recognized many of them. Friends, colleagues, even neighbors. I picked up the first letter, written by Daniel Costa, a colleague. His words were passionate, describing secret meetings and promises of eternal love. Each sentence was a blow, each word a new wound. My mind refused to believe what my eyes read, but the reality was there, raw and undeniable. I was overcome by a sense of nausea, my stomach churning as if trying to expel the pain. I continued reading compulsively, letter after letter. There were correspondences from Roberto Silva, my boss, describing meetings in hotels outside the city. Another was from a young waiter at the local cafe, detailing intimate moments in our own home. With each new discovery, the betrayal seemed deeper and the pain more unbearable. My love for Clara, which had once been the foundation of my existence, now turned into a mixture of hatred and despair. Rage began to infiltrate every cell of my body. My hands trembled so much that they could barely hold the letters. The walls of our office, which had once given me a sense of security, now seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with the revelation of so many dark secrets. The sound of the rain outside seemed like a lament, a symphony of sadness that reflected my state of mind. My thoughts turned to specific moments. I remembered Clara going out late at night with flimsy excuses, quick phone calls she took in the hallway, smiles she gave to other men when she thought I wasn't looking. Every memory now had a new meaning, a new layer of distrust and pain. The love I felt for her was real, but now it was mixed with a bitterness I never thought I could feel. The confirmation of the betrayal was like a punch in the stomach, knocking the air and sanity out of me. The feeling of being betrayed by someone I trusted blindly left me ungrounded. I knew nothing would ever be the same, and those letters had changed my life forever. At that moment, the love I felt for Clara mixed with an uncontrollable fury, creating a whirlwind of emotions that would lead me to make decisions I never imagined I was capable of. I sat in the chair, trying to process everything, but the pain was unbearable. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo in my head, pulsating with the intensity of the rage growing inside me. I couldn't stay there any longer, in that office that was now a tomb of secrets. I stood up and began to walk around the house, as if looking for an escape from the pain consuming me. I needed to confront Clara, needed answers, but at the same time, I feared what she would say. I looked out the window and saw the rain continuing to fall, as if the sky were crying with me. The city seemed asleep, oblivious to the storm of emotions unfolding inside me. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to find a fragment of peace, but all I found was the image of Clara in the arms of other men. With each breath, the pain intensified, and I knew that from that moment on, my life would never be the same. Finally, with the box of letters still in my hands, I sat on the living room sofa and began to cry. The tears fell freely, mixing with the rain beating against the window. I was a destroyed man, betrayed by the one I loved most. That night, after the devastating discovery of the letters, the pain and anger consumed me so much that I couldn't stay inside the house. The rain was falling heavily, as if the sky itself reflected my anguish. I left home aimlessly, with the thunder echoing in the distance and the lightning briefly illuminating the deserted streets of the town. I walked for a while, lost in my thoughts, without direction. With each step, the images of Clara with other men repeated in my mind. Like a horror movie, I couldn't stop watching. Gradually, the rain began to lessen until it finally stopped, leaving the air humid and cold. Then, as I approached the town park, I saw her for the first time. A woman was standing under the dim light of a lamppost, dressed in black, with an aura of mystery surrounding her. Something about her attracted me, as if she were a magnet. My feet led me to her without me realizing it. When I finally got close, the woman looked at me with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface, directly into my soul. Her lips formed a slight smile, but there was something unsettling about that expression, something that made me hesitate, but at the same time compelled me to continue. "You are suffering," she said with a soft, almost hypnotic voice. "I can feel your pain, Lucas." The fact that she knew my name didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Everything felt surreal, like a lucid dream from which I couldn't wake up. I just nodded, unable to articulate any words. The woman took a step forward, getting even closer, and placed her hand on my chest. "I can help you," she continued. "I can grant you a wish." Her words echoed in my mind. A wish. At that moment of despair, the only thing I wanted was revenge. Revenge against all the men who had destroyed my marriage, who had taken Clara from me. The anger boiled inside me, and the temptation to accept the offer was irresistible. "Anything," I murmured, feeling the weight of my own voice. "I want all the men who betrayed with my wife to suffer a painful death." The mysterious woman smiled, a cold smile that made the air around me feel denser, almost suffocating. "It is done," she said simply, removing her hand from my chest. I stood still, stunned for a moment, as she walked away and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone in the now silent park, my mind whirling and my heart heavy. The anger I felt transformed into something darker, an expectation of what was to come. But as I walked back home, I began to doubt everything that had happened. Wishes don't come true like that, I thought. It was nonsense, an invention of my mind disturbed by suffering. I walked back home, the weight of my desire hanging on my shoulders. The streets were wet and reflected the city lights, creating an almost unreal scene. Each step felt heavier, each drop of water accumulating on the asphalt, colder. As I entered the house, the feeling that something irrevocable had been triggered hit me hard, but my disbelief soon took the place of fear. The mysterious woman had said my wish would be granted, but, in my logical mind, it was nothing but nonsense. I lay in bed, exhausted and still stunned, trying to convince myself that it was all just an illusion caused by my suffering. The days that followed that strange night passed in a blur, and soon the following week, something unexpected happened. Daniel Costa, a colleague and one of Clara's lovers, began to complain of strange symptoms. At first, they were just mild discomforts, but they quickly worsened. Within days, Daniel was hospitalized, battling an illness the doctors couldn't diagnose. The news of his condition spread quickly through the company. Everyone was shocked, as Daniel had always been healthy. His condition deteriorated dramatically in just a few days, and he died, leaving everyone perplexed and in mourning. I watched everything with conflicting feelings. Part of me felt a cold pleasure in seeing one of the men who destroyed my marriage suffer, but at the same time, the horror of realizing that my insane wish might be coming true began to insinuate itself into my mind. Shortly after, Roberto Silva, my boss, began to show symptoms similar to Daniel's. Roberto was another of Clara's lovers, and seeing his health deteriorate so quickly was disturbing. He was also hospitalized, but no treatment seemed to have any effect. The medical team was perplexed, and fear began to spread among the staff. In less than a week, Roberto also died, victim of this inexplicable illness. As I watched Roberto wither away, the reality began to settle in my mind. The wish I made that dark night, which I believed to be just a cry of despair, was coming true. The satisfaction I felt seeing Daniel and Roberto suffer was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. I had indeed wished for the painful death of all the men who cheated with my wife, but I never imagined it would become a reality in such a literal and terrifying way. More men in the town began to fall ill in a similar manner. They were known to have had affairs with Clara, and their deaths followed with alarming regularity. The town began to be gripped by fear and paranoia as people sought answers for the unexplained deaths. I, on the other hand, was trapped in a cycle of horror and guilt. Seeing my rivals suffer should have brought me some relief, but what I felt was a growing torment. Each new case of illness reminded me of my insane wish and the words of the mysterious woman. The initial satisfaction turned into a constant nightmare. I found myself torn between a sense of fulfilled justice and the horror of the consequences of my rage. Every day, my fear grew. What else could happen? How many more lives would be lost because of my dark wish? The deaths of the men who cheated with Clara did not bring me peace. Instead, they only deepened my despair and remorse. In the weeks that followed, the situation in the town quickly deteriorated. What began with the deaths of Daniel and Roberto soon turned into a public health crisis that no one could explain. All the men who had had affairs with Clara began to fall ill, showing the same mysterious symptoms. Panic gripped the community, and the once peaceful town found itself plunged into an atmosphere of fear and distrust. The doctors were at a loss, unable to identify the source of the illness or find a cure. With each new case, the sense of helplessness grew among the medical community. The streets became deserted, and people avoided contact, fearing contamination. News of the crisis began to appear in the media, but no specialist could offer a plausible explanation. It was as if the town was under a curse. Clara, for her part, was becoming increasingly desperate. She couldn't understand why all the men who had come close to her were dying in such a tragic manner. The guilt was eating her up, but she didn't know of my responsibility in this disaster. Each new death was a blow to her sanity, and she began to distance herself from me, desperately seeking a reason for the situation. I watched everything with a mixture of horror and remorse. Clara avoided my gaze, spending more time out of the house, trying to find an explanation for the inexplicable. The distance between us grew with each passing day, and I found myself unable to comfort her or reveal the truth about my wish. The house, which was once a refuge, now became a place of unbearable silence and tension. The days passed slowly, and the number of victims continued to rise. Each new case brought me a crushing sense of guilt. The weight of my insane wish was destroying not only the men who cheated with Clara, but also the very essence of the town. Funerals became frequent events, and mourning seemed permanent. I tried to find the woman again, hoping to undo the wish, but she seemed to have completely disappeared. Every night, I walked through the same places where I met her, but she never appeared again. Despair grew within me, and the reality that I was the cause of so much suffering ate away at my soul. The nights became unbearable. Clara slept in another room, and I stayed awake, reliving the moment I made that insane wish. The image of the mysterious woman, with her cold smile, wouldn't leave me in peace. The weight of my anger and impulsiveness manifested in constant nightmares, and I woke up sweaty, with my heart racing. Clara began to avoid even being at home. She started to be away for long periods, and our encounters became rare and tense. Every time our eyes met, I saw a mixture of fear and incomprehension in her. She was distancing herself, not just physically, but emotionally as well. And I, a prisoner of my guilt, could do nothing to stop it. In the weeks that followed, the situation in the town quickly deteriorated. What began with the deaths of Daniel and Roberto soon turned into a public health crisis that no one could explain. All the men who had had affairs with Clara began to fall ill, showing the same mysterious symptoms. Panic gripped the community, and the once peaceful town found itself plunged into an atmosphere of fear and distrust. The doctors were at a loss, unable to identify the source of the illness or find a cure. With each new case, the sense of helplessness grew among the medical community. The streets became deserted, and people avoided contact, fearing contamination. News of the crisis began to appear in the media, but no specialist could offer a plausible explanation. It was as if the town was under a curse. Clara, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly desperate. She couldn't understand why all the men who had approached her were dying in such a tragic manner. The guilt was eating her up, but she didn't know of my responsibility in this disaster. Each new death was a blow to her sanity, and she began to distance herself from me. Desperately seeking a meaning for the situation, I watched everything with a mixture of horror and remorse. Clara avoided my gaze, spending more time out of the house, trying to find an explanation for the inexplicable. The distance between us increased every day, and I found myself unable to comfort her or reveal the truth about my wish. The house, which was once a refuge, now became a place of unbearable silence and tension. The days passed slowly, and the number of victims continued to grow. Each new case brought me a crushing sense of guilt. The weight of my insane wish was destroying not only the men who had affairs with Clara, but also the very essence of the town. Funerals became frequent events, and mourning seemed permanent. Despair and guilt consumed me to such an extent that each day felt like an endless torment. I knew I needed to find the mysterious woman again. She was the only one who could help me undo the wish that I now realized had been a terrible mistake. Endless nights passed as I wandered the deserted streets, revisiting the places where I first met her. My search was frantic and desperate, and the hope of finding her diminished each day. I was on the verge of giving up when, on a full moon night, my perseverance was rewarded. There she was, standing under the same streetlight in the park, exactly as the first time. The moon illuminated her figure, creating an almost supernatural halo around her. A mixture of relief and fear coursed through my body as I approached. A shiver ran down my spine, but the determination to undo the harm I had caused propelled me forward. "I knew you would come," she said, with the same enigmatic smile. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but carried a weight I could not ignore. I approached her, falling to my knees, tears streaming down my face. "Please," I begged, "give me another chance. I didn't know what I was asking for that night. All I want now is for my wife to truly love me. I want Clara back, as she was before." The woman looked at me with an expression that mixed compassion and disapproval. "Lucas, you must understand that wishes have consequences. But because I see your regret, I will grant you this second chance." Before I could react, I felt a wave of relief and exhaustion wash over me. When I opened my eyes again, I was back home, sitting in the living room. The feeling of having lived a bad dream persisted, but something had changed. Clara, who had been distant and cold, entered the room and, to my surprise, approached me with a tender smile. "Lucas," she said softly, sitting next to me and holding my hand. "I'm sorry for everything. I want you to know that I truly love you." Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. She had suddenly become affectionate and caring, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Those first few weeks after the encounter with the mysterious woman brought unexpected relief. Clara had indeed become more affectionate and caring, and our relationship seemed to be reborn from the ashes. Laughter once again filled our home, and conversations stretched late into the night. For a brief moment, I believed that everything could really be resolved. However, that sense of peace was short-lived. I began to feel strange, first with a slight indisposition that I tried to ignore. As the days passed, the symptoms intensified. A constant fever took hold of me, accompanied by a weakness that prevented me from performing even the simplest tasks. Clara, worried, insisted that I see a doctor, but something inside me knew the truth. Slowly, the reality began to reveal itself cruelly. I was falling ill, and the disease that was taking over my body was similar to the one that had taken so many men to their deaths. The bitter irony did not escape me. The wish I had made in a moment of anger and despair was now turning against me. I began to reflect on the words of the mysterious woman about the consequences of wishes. What I had asked for was not just revenge against those who had betrayed my trust, but a curse that now fell upon me. I realized that my punishment was an extension of my own wish, retribution for the rage that had fueled my heart. Each day was a battle to find strength, and Clara, unaware of the true origin of my condition, did everything possible to comfort me. In her caring actions, I saw the reflection of what I most longed for, true love. However, this realization brought with it a profound sadness, for I knew that time was running out. To fall ill like this, seeing Clara by my side, but feeling life slip away slowly, was the cruelest of ironies. I had regained her love, but at the cost of my own life. I understood that by trying to manipulate fate, I had sealed my own end.